This Quoircast Podcast episode is brought to you by me. Hi, I'm Tim, the creator and facilitator of the New Evangelicals and host of the New Evangelicals podcast. Original, I know. We are a Jesus-centered and inclusive community that holds space for the folks marginalized by the Evangelical Church, advocates for accountability in the church, and we help people like you leave that cold, dark, and damp basement of evangelical fundamentalism behind to explore the rooms of the Christian tradition together. You can check out our podcast to hear from all kinds of amazing guests who are way smarter than me, and even a few episodes where I get to rant to our podcast producer about how dangerous Christian nationalism is. Ah, good times. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts or slide into our DMs on Instagram at the New Evangelicals. Thanks.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with Jon and Nat Turney.
Hello. All right. That was my British Matthew McConaughey. You like it? All right. Hello. Welcome back to the show, laddies and lassies. I don't know. I'm morphed into some other weird accent. And this is why I don't do voices. But welcome back to the podcast. Jon immediately agrees. Yeah, really. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, hey. I can't do them either. I can do, I can sound like someone who talks white trash, maybe. I can do a little bit of redneck.
But none of those are a real stretch, I don't think.
Well, and then I guess Californians have an accent, but since I've lived here my whole life, I don't hear it. But, you know, we have other states and other countries talk about our funny accents. So
I guess I don't notice.
We,
to me,
we use words like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of, back in the day when we were kids, there was that whole Valley Girl thing that was going on.
Yeah, I never did that.
There's that whole Fry voice where girls are like, anyway, so I'm just going to go to the mall. And they'll just I'll sound like supremely disinterested in everything.
Well, then there's the stoner voice, right? The stoner voice with the stoner laugh. the Marx, I forget the guy's first name, but Spicoli from exactly.
High. Hey, dude, man, that's my pizza, man.
But you morph back into Matthew McConaughey.
Well, I think they're the same guy. If they ever did a remake of Fast Times, Matthew McConaughey's got to play that guy.
He's a little old now.
Well, yeah. How much fun? And he'd be in high school. It'd be amazing. All right.
That would be funny. Okay.
So this is the podcast, by the way, in case you clicked the play button and you were like, what the absolute fuck is going on here? I thought this was a podcast and they're going to talk about Jesus and stuff. We might at any given time. We also might just rabbit trail into some nonsensical bullcrap and amuse ourselves. Really, that's what this is, Jon.
I know.
You understand that this is just us amusing ourselves.
We're just allowing people to join us on this journey of our buffoonery.
Yes. Oh, new tagline for the podcast. Join us on our journey of buffoonery. It's got to have a lot of echo at the end. All right. So when we get into, we can start naming the episodes, for the different parts of the journey of buffoonery. So Episode 1, the buffoonery commences in episode 1. And it's actually going to go for the whole time because we don't have a guest today. And so do you remember going to Cave Junction with the kids and, everybody? So stick with me. This is interesting. So we go to these caves in Oregon. Hold on. We go on. If I'm kind of a cave guy, I like exploring caves. Okay, exploring. I like to go to caves that have been explored.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not a spelunker.
No. This is me going into caves that have already been deemed to be pretty safe. I think they're fascinating. But if you ever get a chance to go to Cave Junction, go to the Oregon caves, they're a little different because they're kind of small. They're not like Carlsbad Caverns that are enormous, right? And so Jon and I are there with our kids. And I think my wife was there. I'm not sure if Greta was there.
Yeah, she was there. Yep.
Okay, Greta was there. And so we start going through this cave. Just preface the story with my wife doesn't like tight spaces. And so there is a place about, I don't know, maybe halfway through the tour. You remember this?
Yeah.
Where they're like, hey, this is your last chance to leave now. Otherwise you have to go to the end. And before the guy finished the sentence, Kim was sprinting for the exit. And she was like, peace, I'll see y'all in the coffee shop.
Well, I think they also said this is the last place. And by the way, it gets narrower from here.
It gets narrower and it gets worse. And this is your last chance to get off. Why did I tell you that story? Because if you've clicked play, and you're wondering what the hell you stumbled into, this is your chance to get out. Because it's only going to get weirder and narrower from here. So,
I thought for sure I thought you were going to go and talk about the park ranger guy.
Oh, I wish I had that. I have a video of him somewhere. Ranger Rick. Remember him?
Yep. Ranger Rick.
He was a weird dude, man. I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% sure if that a news broadcast had, come out any time after this had happened and they'd nailed him as a serial killer, we would have all been like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Yep. I saw that coming. That guy gave off like weird serial killer vibes, man. Like he maybe goes home and dresses as a clown. And,
in that video that you had, the funny part was like you were trying to video him on the down low. So he didn't know. He got mad. And he caught you and you said, no, I'm just taking a picture. And he's like, are you videoing me?
He's like, no, click. And let's go deeper in the caves with Ranger Rick. Oh my God. All right. This goes into the list of, a very long list, by the way, of just dumb things I've done. But anyway, what we thought we would do today, John and I, by the way, I'm Nat, and John is the other guy on the other side. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
All right, just in case we go one episode and don't pull that little shtick out.
Right, yeah, exactly.
We have to have some consistency. But anyway, what we thought we would do, since it is going to be a new year pretty soon, is we would just have our little year in review. We need theme music. A year in review. A year in review. I don't know about you, but it's been a hell of a year in review. Hey!
You used like the same like little catchy tune for everything.
Bring that up. No, because catching up with Keith is do.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right.
It's close. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to win any awards for creativity or originality. Everything I do is derivative.
I was going to go down another rabbit trail, but maybe we should talk about the podcast.
We should. So what we thought we would do is we would just talk about the year. Because what a thought it. Oh my God. We're going into, I guess this means we're going into year 3, calendar year.
Yeah, calendar year. Yeah. I mean, the first year.
We started in 2020.
Right.
2021
in March.
March. So about a third of the way through the second quarter of that calendar year.
Yeah.
And we did an end of the year review almost a year ago today. And really what we kind of focused in on that first year in review was just the utter shock.
Yeah, really.
We talked about, how cool it was to actually get a chance to, our guest list filled up really fast. We got a lot of people that actually agreed to come on the podcast, which was surprising.
Right.
Kind of talked about our growing pains, right?
Yeah.
Because there was a lot to learn. We didn't know what we were doing. And so there was a lot of that growth that happened in that first season, I guess you could call it. But we had a blast. We had some really good stuff. So we want to talk about year 2, because we had a full calendar year 2022 to talk about.
Yep.
A whole year's worth of a body of content that's out there. And I wanted to start off with one of the things that I'm the most proud of. And then we'll go from there. You ready for this?
Sure. So go for it.
When John and I first started, it was very, I don't want to say haphazard because that's not right. It wasn't that. But we didn't have a really well-conceived plan, right? Mm-hmm. We had a couple of friends who had podcasts and we were like, man, that's kind of cool. If we were going to do one, I'd do one like that, right? I like the guest-driven interview style. I like having people on. I don't think people really want to hear what John and I have to say for a full hour. So, and I just like talking to people. So I think we found out pretty quickly that we're fairly good at that, at talking to people and asking, I think, good questions and letting them say what they need to say and interjecting when necessary. But what we noticed after the first few, the first few episodes and then the first handful of bookings was, man, there were a lot of dudes on that.
Yeah.
Like we were booking a lot of dudes, not just dudes, but white dudes.
Right.
And so John and I had a very serious conversation about, man, we have to do better. Like it's not that we don't like white dudes. We are white dudes. But there are more than enough places to hear the white dude perspective.
Right.
And so we really felt convicted is my religious word of the day. There you go.
Convicted.
We felt challenged to be way more diverse than that. And in order to do that, we had to be very intentional. And so we started reaching out to a lot more women. We started reaching out to a lot more people in the LGBTQIA+ community, reaching out to people of color, reaching out to people with diverse and different backgrounds. And what I found as I was going through our list of guests for 2022, we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Like I'm probably going to hurt myself patting myself on the back because the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 5 or 6 guests of 2022 were either women or members of the LGBTQI plus community. So, I mean, we kicked off, and people of color as well. So, literally our first guest of 2022 was Shonda Jha. And if you don't know Shonda, get to know her. She's amazing. And now she's so cool that Heretic Happy Hour has pulled her in as a co-host of their podcast. And so there's that. And
she has that other podcast. And forgive me for not remembering the name.
Is she doing the one about the Last Airbender?
I believe so. Yeah. And it's really cool because what she's doing is she's bringing in people of color and getting their perspective on the show. So I think that's a really cool take on how you can talk about that show. Because I think, different cultures, different people with different backgrounds view things differently, right? And,
sure.
It's cool to get their perspective, specifically since, as much as we like to pretend like that's a show about a bunch of white people, it's not.
This is so bad. We've even co-opted Japanese animation.
Well, I mean, the movie they made out of it basically did that, right? I mean, it's like, well, first of all, I don't even want to talk about that.
I never saw it. It's not my thing. It's anime, and it's not just anime. It's
manga or manga.
Thank you. God, I don't want to use the wrong term, but but that's, more power to you if that's your thing. There's lots of things that I'm into that I'm sure people are like, yeah, but why? Why would you do that? So, but we kicked off 2022 with Shonda, went straight into Sarah Cunningham's Susan Cottrell, Lisa Sharon Harper. We liked her so much she was on twice because we realized after an entire conversation we hadn't really talked about her book. We just got so engrossed in a conversation that was so good. We're like, you know what? Could you come back on and actually talk about the book?
Yeah, really,
because that would be great. So, Alexander John Shaya. And then a couple of dudes, nothing against the dudes, but and then we kicked off like 2 episodes with Diana Bass, Carolyn Whitney Brown, Dr. Robin Espinoza, who has since transitioned and is now Roberta Che Espinoza, Ellen Compton, Amy Courts. Really, dude, like the first half of 2022 seems like we hit our goal of let's see how many people of color, how many female voices, how many people in the LGBTQIA plus community we could get on. And you know what? And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but the other part of that for me was selfish. I need those perspectives.
Yeah.
Because that's not my normal day to day.
Right.
I don't live in those communities. I don't haven't experienced life the way that they have. And if I'm to be more genuinely human and hopefully more genuinely empathetic, I have to have those perspectives. I have to know I have to hear from those people. And that helps us learn how to empathize. It also helps us learn how to talk about the subjects and issues that are important to those communities without just inserting our own perspectives into it and going, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? Well, it's not my job to tell those communities how to affect change. It's my job, I think, to offer myself as an ally. I absolutely will offer myself as an ally. But in order to do that, I have to know what the hell I'm talking about. And so anyway, I thought that was great. And what's even cooler is within those guests that we had on is a huge spectrum of perspectives and ideologies. Everyone from people who are still kind of staunchly in evangelical church world to people who have left the whole damn thing behind, people who are, advocating for change from within, people who are who have just moved on completely. Yeah, people like Carolyn Whitney Brown, who was finishing a book by a phenomenal Christian thinker, Henry Nouwen. Anyway, that's what 22 surprised me. I didn't realize it because as we were going through it, we were just kind of in the midst of it.
Right.
But I went back to sort of take a look at the episodes over the last year. I'm like, holy crap. Okay. All right. Good job. This is Not Church Podcast. You said you wanted to be this, and I think we did a pretty darn good job. Can we do better? Sure. There's nowhere near enough Indigenous voices. Help us find them. And we would love to. There are people and perspectives that I'm sure we have not had a chance to talk to. But anyway, that was my surprise for 2022. What about you, man?
Well, just to kind of coattail on what you're saying is our acknowledgement that we do have privilege, that as white, middle-aged, cisgender males, we're on the top of the food chain when it comes to privilege.
Oh, yeah.
And you can either use that privilege to better yourself only, or you can use that privilege to help give voice to people who, maybe in other situations don't have a voice. So, if I was to pat myself on the back or anything, I was like, that's something we've done. We've acknowledged, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we have that privilege and not get mad about it, because it's super easy to say, well, yeah, but I still work really hard to get what I have. And we've,
you don't know what I've suffered, man.
Yeah. I was poor too. I didn't get all the cool toys either. But, and we could talk about, some of the shifts and where we started realizing that's not what they're talking about when they talk about privilege.
Right.
It's this, your starting line is, a whole football field ahead of everybody else for a 100-yard dash. That's what they're talking about. It's not that we haven't also had hard times. It's not that I also, was raised in a family with not a lot of money. It wasn't, I wasn't able to get grants so I could go to college on the cheap, right? That's not what they're talking about. So what I think and what I would pat ourselves on the back for is that we did do that. And we did it with no agenda in the sense that, yes, we were intentional on bringing these people on the podcast, but there was no agenda on our end on what they had to say.
No, none at all.
So we decided way in the beginning that we really didn't like canned questions. Obviously, if someone had them, we would ask them. But we intentionally came into all these interviews with no idea where we wanted it to go. No direction, right?
Yeah,
and we just kind of let the guest guide us where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has allowed people to really connect and understand and really love what's going on, because they get to hear these people's stories without us interjecting. Obviously we do interject, but we are not guiding the conversation. The guests are guiding the conversation. We take it wherever they want to go.
Well, and that means that we get to do that and be non-confrontational. I'm not interested in confrontation. I don't run from it, and I'm not avoiding it.
No.
And there have been guests who've said stuff that we've pushed back on. But the purpose of the podcast is not to be argumentative. A good example is the one we did with Allison, who is LDS, and I'm not.
Right.
I have big problems. I've got big problems with the LDS Church, but no bigger than I have with the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church or the fundamentalist Protestant. The point wasn't to get into the weeds of the theology. It was interesting to see somebody doing some sort of deconstruction work that wasn't a fundamentalist Christian.
Right.
Okay, how do you tackle that inside of that system? Because LDS folks, Mormons, can be every bit as fundamentalist as everybody else, but there's also a spectrum inside of that organization. That to me was fascinating. I loved the fact that I didn't know that until we had her on. All I knew was she was a client of Meg Calvin, who we love. And if Meg says we should talk to her, then hell, we're going to talk to her. And that little tidbit came out almost accidentally, just because some of the words she used.
Yeah,
there was some language. I'm like, I'm picking up on some. I think at some point she mentioned the LDS Church, and I had thought maybe she had left the LDS Church.
Right.
That would have been an interesting story. It was way more interesting that she had not left, and that she was doing her questioning and her pushing from inside of that organization. Yeah, I love that episode.
Yeah, for me, it was with that episode. It was I read the book, and there were a couple phrases that sounded different to me. Not being raised in a Mormon church, being raised in an evangelical Christian church, they weren't so off that I knew what it was. But there were a couple phrases that got used kind of a few times in the book, and I'm just like, that's an interesting way to say that. And then when she basically mentioned that she was LDS, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Now all that stuff starts to click into place.
Things like to click in. And and the first thing to do, or could easily be, let's talk about how bad the Mormon church is and how crazy they are. Like the evangelical church doesn't like hold the corner on crazy, right? Yeah. But instead, it was like, hey, let's delve into this for a minute. And I think we talked a couple times, like, we're not making you the poster child for the Mormon church, but if this is interesting, let's talk about this for a minute. And she was very open to it, and it was a learning experience for me. I'm assuming for you as well, and I'm hopefully for the listeners too. And what it did for again for me is like, it's like, damn it, we just have so much more in common than we have differences when we talk to people of different, and I don't want to say different faiths because they are within the Christian faith. I don't want to make it sound like
Yeah, well, you and I were raised to think otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And that's part of that language, right?
I had to like make a conscious choice to temper what I think I know about the Mormon church.
Right.
Based upon all the antagonistic propaganda we had received growing up. And so I tried to put that aside to the best of my ability, because most of what you and I had learned about that church was, and again, big issues with the church as an organization, as a structure. I have the same pushback against them that I have against every other enormous organization that is too authoritarian, that is too controlling of people's lives.
Yeah, I'd say any system within church, or it doesn't even have to be church. It could be, any other system, but any system that has built itself around secrecy and privacy, right?
Right.
Once you get into the upper echelon of whatever, where only certain people can get into the inner sanctum, the red flags go up for me anyway. And that could be in the church, that could be in politics, that could be in, these crazy private clubs that supposedly exist around this country, which is one in Santa Rosa. I always forget the name of it though. The Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove. But anyway, there I go down another rabbit hole.
Yeah, so that was
good
cool.
on us. Good on us.
We can start out by saying, hey, I think we did a pretty good job.
52 weeks, but we had more than 52 episodes because we did at least two.
We did a couple bonus episodes.
Yeah, we did. So we had Lisa Sharon Harper on for like a Monday and a Wednesday, and then Diana Butler Bass a Monday and a Wednesday.
Right.
And I think there was another one in there somewhere too, but I don't remember off the top of my head right now.
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting group. As I'm going through the list, I'm going, man, there's a very diverse group of people. I mean, you can go back and look at the people who really aren't, I wouldn't put them in the, they're Christian authors, or, they're not trying to write necessarily in that vein. Someone like Will Jawando, who is, writing a book about his experience as a black man in America. Yeah, there's spiritual undertones to everything because he's a spiritual man, but he's a politician and he's an activist. And that's a little bit different than our normal, somebody writing a book about deconstruction, or somebody writing a book, say like a Brad Jersak, or whoever, say Brian McLaren or somebody like that, who's writing from inside, even if it's on the margins of, they're still writing from inside that Christian tradition.
Right.
Yeah. So there were some interesting folks that I thought were fascinating to talk to. But, and then, across the age spectrum, from these young, brilliant people in their 20s, those little boogers who are just so far ahead of the curve, and they're getting their PhDs, and they're like, what are you doing? How are you so with it? All the way up to a guy like John Dominic Crossan, who's been doing this forever, and he's 80 years old, and he's still like pumping out books like they're nothing. And so I got to talk to a couple of guys that I would put in my sort of hero category this last year. And John Dominic Crossan is absolutely one. And then obviously, Brian McLaren was another. So getting a chance to pick their brains and talk to them. John Dominic Crossan's episode about his book, Render Unto Caesar, was just revelatory. I mean, it just took it. And then to find out on top of it that they're genuinely pretty nice people. I like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I'm going to say that we've just been lucky, right? First of all, I think anyone who's reaching out to a podcast or agreeing to come on a podcast, for the most part, I think are going to be wanting to talk about something. But every single person we talked to was genuinely a very nice person. Some of them I would consider friends now, right? We got to talk, and we ended up talking offline, and we connected, through Facebook or whatever. And, now comment on, chat a little bit back and forth on a fairly regular basis. And people that, if it wasn't for this podcast, I would have never met.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, that's another big, plus for me, it's just a friend circle that's growing, and including people who are, willing to ask hard questions and wanting to talk about how we can become better human beings and work together to become a better species. We had, someone is like, Katie Walter Anthony, right? I believe, did I get her name right?
Yeah, you're right. With the,
talking about the emissions. What's
climate,
methane emissions?
Yeah, talking
within
about climate change.
And she brought a Christian perspective to that, right? Which I think a lot of people kind of cringe at when they're like, "Oh, the scientist is a Christian." I mean, how serious do they take their their work then, because they just think that God's going to take care of everything. And I thought she did a really good job of marrying the two and being willing to talk about climate change and how these emissions are increasing and the potential dangers of what could happen, right? But at the same time, talking about faith. So I thought that was really cool. So we're about halfway through this episode, right?
Did you want to drop a bomb halfway through?
No, I was just trying to figure out where we are.
Where we are is in the ether somewhere.
Yeah.
About to make a big announcement.
Yeah,
John,
right.
I am not quitting the podcast. There we go. Boom.
All right. There it is.
Boom.
Well, I mean,
it. You can fire me if you want to, but
yeah, you're like, fire me. I don't get paid. What am I getting fired for?
Ooh, think of all the okay. So if we talk about things that have surprised us too, how much I've enjoyed this has been. I kind of did this, and you know this. I mean, this was your vision and your thing, and I was like, okay, sure. I wasn't unexcited about it, but it wasn't something that I had like some kind of fire burning in my belly. I need to have a podcast, and I'm just pleasantly surprised at how much fun it is. Like it's just good, you know. There is an announcement that we can make, and it's not. I mean, it's an announcement that's happened a while back, but one of the things that happened in 2022 was that our friends Matt DeStefano and Keith Giles purchased Quoir Publishing.
Right.
And so they are now the owners of that publishing house and are taking it to the next level, which I think is amazing. If you have been a follower of the podcast at all, you know we have a good relationship with Quoir. John is already a published author with Quoir through Parenting Deconstructed. I have signed my contract, and we're actually in typesetting mode for my book that's coming out sometime next year. But we've had a ton of Quoir authors on as guests, right? And so out of that, I think Matt DeStefano was the one who pushed for a podcast network. And we had been talking about this for months before it happened. He reached out to us months ago and said, hey, if we did this, would you be interested? And we're like, absolutely. Yeah, hell yes. So that has happened and has been launched. So now we have Quoircast Podcast Network, which includes us, Heretic Happy Hour, Apostates Anonymous or Apostates Anonymous, Ideas Digest, and one other that just signed on.
Did you say Messy Spirituality?
Oh, I'm sorry. Messy Spirituality. Sorry, Jason.
And then...
I did not mean to leave you out, dude.
And then the New Evangelicals.
New Evangelicals. So
that's the one that just signed on.
And Matt and Keith are actively looking for more folks to bring into the fold and more different and divergent voices. So it's awesome. Ideas Digest, aren't they? They're Australian or New Zealand, or I think they're Australian.
I'm going to say Australian. And if we find out
either
that they're...
Aussies or Kiwis.
Right.
And I'm going to offend a whole lot of people and say, what's the difference?
So, okay, I'll tell, because we've always heard this, right? That Aussies and Kiwis don't get along, right? Yeah. And I always figure this is like, whatever. And then so, our parents have a friend named Roz who lives in Australia.
Right.
And she invited Greta and I and the kids to come visit, which unfortunately we have not done, but I hope to do sometime in the future. And she's like, yeah, you can come stay with us. We'll take you around, show you the sights. And I was like, hey, yeah. And if possible, I'd like to go over to New Zealand. And she's like, you can go. We're not going. I'm like, what? She goes, we don't go there. I'm like, oh, so this thing is real. She's like, absolutely real. I'm like, okay.
Wow. So we need to get on with our Aussie friends and our Kiwi friends and find out what's the origin of that rift between the Aussies and the Kiwis. I've always just sort of considered New Zealand as like Australia without all the things that kill you.
Yeah, doesn't like every animal in Australia have the ability to kill you?
Yeah,
even like the koala bear.
And I don't think there's a venomous or poisonous. There's not a venomous animal on the island of New Zealand. I think they sent them all to Australia. That's why they're pissed off.
That's why they're mad.
And Australia has all these like, holy crap! They got the funnel spiders, and they've got all. I mean, they got kangaroos that'll just beat the shit out of you, just assault you in the streets. Koalas are vicious. They'll strip the bamboo right off you, man. No, they don't eat bamboo. Those are pandas. They eat eucalyptus. My bad.
What are the other?
So anyway, but all of that is to say, get back to the original point, which was that network is expanding. We're super happy about that. We're happy for Keith and Matt, and excited to see what happens to Quoir as it continues to grow.
Yeah,
it seems like every book they put out lately makes an appearance in the top 10 list on Amazon for some categories. So I think the work they're doing is pretty darn good.
There will be some news coming up that we can't talk about, so we can tell you to look forward to the upcoming year. Oh, okay. I'll just whisper it. They won't hear.
Really soft. They won't know. I don't even know. Tell me offline. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Okay. No, you know.
You what?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
But it's some interesting stuff. It's stuff with choir, and it's stuff that it's really gonna kind of broaden their connection to the world and stuff, and just the whole interweb thing. So, but yeah, there will be some new news coming out. Hopefully, sometime in 2023.
Did you say interweb?
I did. The interwebs.
Oh, the worldwide interweb.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk?
But I don't want to gloss over that. The Nat said he has a book coming out, because I've already had the opportunity to read it, and it's an amazing book, and everybody out there is going to really, really want to get it. I'm not biased. Well, yes, I am. But
you're gonna want to buy 10 copies each.
Yes, 10 copies each.
Because I am planning a Caribbean cruise next Christmas, and I really could use your financial support. So if you want to sow into my ministry, and you want a written guarantee that God will bless your endeavors. Yeah, don't do that. But anyway, yeah, no, I'm excited about it. It's daunting, because I know that there's a lot of stuff once we get past the typesetting phase, which I think Matt told me a couple of weeks ago that mine was the next to start on that part of it. So we get through the mechanics of it. Excuse me. Then we'll start on the more creative side of designing a cover and having to, and then the work really starts. You have to put together a launch team. So if you're a listener to the podcast, I will probably launch my launch team through the This Is Not Church private group. That makes the most sense to me. There's already several hundred people there that are engaged. So be watching out for your opportunity to jump in on a launch team, get an advanced copy of the book to read, promise me your firstborn child, and to buy several copies of the book and write glowing reviews on. That's just part of the marketing process. So that's all coming up. So right now I'm just kind of in wait mode to see when that's going to happen. But yeah, it's exciting, man. And then I have agreed to write a chapter for another upcoming book of Matt DeStefano's that John's already written his chapter for.
So hopefully we can get that book done in 2023 too, because I think everyone,
yeah, I don't want to say what it's about because Matt hasn't yet said what it's about or made any public declarations about it. But
it was fun to write.
Say it will be different.
Yeah,
I don't think there'll be anything. Matt's always got that way of finding something that's just like, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, so there's some cool stuff coming. So, and then some other writing projects that hopefully John and I will kick off in the next year. But as time permits and as jobs and children and grandchildren permit and all the other stuff that's happening in our lives. So
that's the other thing that happened for you. You are grandfather third time around.
For the third time, the little booger showed up on December 16th and proceeded to scare the hell out of everybody. So that was fun. He was fairly premature, and we knew that he would be. And then he spent about a week in the hospital. So
how premature? I mean, I don't think I even know this.
He was almost a month premature.
Oh, okay. I figured because was it almost planned?
It was 100% planned, but because my daughter's health is pretty tenuous. She has issues she has respiratory issues. And so the doctor didn't want her to go to full term for her health.
Got it.
So the larger that baby got, the more difficult her breathing was getting. Obviously, they take up space inside your body and,
Right.
So anyway, so they kind of made a plan like, hey, well, let's get him past this, this many weeks of gestation. We'll feel pretty good that he's going to be solid, and so they just made a choice. And so he was not super, super small, but not big. He was almost 6 pounds or around 6 pounds, but they noticed some fluid on his lungs when he was first born. And so they immediately took him to the NICU, put some breathing apparatus on him, and then just proceeded to watch him for a couple of days. And so it was hard on Elena because she's, and any mother who's carried children knows this. Like the second you've had that baby, what do you want? You want that baby in your arms, now. And she couldn't even see him for several hours. And then a couple of days later, they airlifted him to a children's hospital in Fort Worth so they could get a little bit better care. And we came home on Christmas Eve. So, all is well. There were it's an interesting place to be. Because on the one hand, it's hard. But there's some perspective there as we're sitting in the NICU of the Children's Hospital, looking at families who have been in that hospital for months and who aren't going home anytime soon. Whose babies are really struggling and who are, I have a friend of mine right now named Rita, and her latest grandchild has been in the hospital for a month. He was born at 26 weeks. And he was teeny tiny, and they just, I think maybe a couple of days ago, were able to hold him for the first time. So, as difficult as all of this was, it was like, okay,
right.
Kept having to be that guy with my daughter going, okay, I know this stinks and you're entitled, to all of that, but you're not going through that.
Yeah. I mean, it's for good or for bad, you and I both have this perspective, right? So the first thing would be because of issues with our, with our children and being, sitting in ICUs. The last thing we would want for any of our kids is to have a kid in the ICU.
Right. It's terrible.
Unfortunately, we have that perspective, right? My wife and I also had the same kind of, for lack of a better phrase, come to Jesus moment when we were looking around us and we're like, okay, that family's not coming home with their child. That family is going to be in here for 6 months. And we're in here for about a week. And then we get to go home. And yes, that week was tough.
Yeah.
And hard. Right.
Well,
and we did it. Yeah. And we did it multiple times. It wasn't just like a one and done. We did this 6 times. And each time you came with the risk of, this could be the one that doesn't work. Right. And, but, we're sitting next to a kid in the ICU who had tried to take her own life. And, now they're like looking for a new liver. And if they can't find a liver for this child, the child might not come out of the hospital. Honestly, now looking back, I think I actually have to ask my wife about this. I actually think that we were sitting next to someone on an ECMO machine, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because, or something very, very similar that was pulling all the blood out. And so there was, you can tell me if this sounds right. There was a doc or a nurse that her job was basically to sit and watch
it's called a perfusionist.
And they were looking for air in the line, right?
Mm-hmm. Constantly.
So that was literally someone, and that was their job. They were sitting at the side of the bed or at the end, I think, actually. Yep. I don't remember exactly.
That machine would sit at the end of the bed. There's one highly trained nurse whose job it is to watch that machine. And they would come in at all hours of the day and night. In the middle of the night, they would come in with a flashlight. Yeah. And they would run that flashlight up and down the tubes because they're clear cannulas that carry the blood to and from the body.
Yeah.
And she was constantly, Elena was on that machine for months. Extracorporeal membrane oxygenation is what it stands for. And literally they take all the blood out of your body, scrub all the CO2 out, oxygenate it, send it back to your body, basically taking the place of your lungs, right? And then when they first started using that machine, they used it for like a heart and lung bypass because you could be, operating on somebody's heart and lungs while the machine's doing that. But they found out that with people with like sudden acute respiratory failure, they could put them on this machine for hopefully a short amount of time, give their body a chance to heal and not have to have them on such high level of life support. So anyway, yeah, it's an interest. But Elena was also hypercoagulative. So we didn't know that until she goes, her meaning that for whatever reason, her blood coagulates at an extraordinary rate. And so she kept, there's a little spinning fan kind of thing in the middle of this thing. It's the circuit. It's the heart of the heart machine. And it kept clogging up.
Oh, wow.
With this super coagulated blood. And they would just have to, so they replaced her machine like 12 or 13 times while she was in it. And every single one of those was having to take her off of it for a minute. Oh, it was hard. Anyway, yeah, heartbreaking.
Yeah. But I mean, just all that to say that you and I and other people were not singular in this, but having that perspective and then watching your own child go through something like that, it's heart-wrenching. But at the same time, you have a perspective where you can say, hey, I know this sucks and it's tough, but as a family, as a unit, we're going to get through this.
Yeah. And it really amps up your empathy,
Yeah, absolutely.
My wife was particularly good at this in the hospital. She got really, really attuned to people who were suffering. Like she could just see it on their face. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of, someone suffering recognizes somebody else's suffering pretty easily. And so she was, she tried to turn a lot of her energies towards being encouraging to the other people in the hospital. You know, there were people coming in and out all the time. And, it's tough.
Yeah, where I noticed that was in the cafeteria.
Yeah, for sure.
It was like, for some reason, it was almost like, even more so than say like I know most hospitals have a place where you can go pray. I don't.
Chapel.
Chapel. Thank you. But I don't know. It almost like the cafeteria was your place to get, you had permission to kind of like show your true face.
Well, up in the halls of the hospital, you got to be brave, man. I mean, you put on that persona for the person you're caring for,
right?
You know, and then you walk out the door and you fall apart,
right? So that was where, you know, Grant and I would like, we weren't a lot of words. It was just a lot of staring.
Yeah, but a lot of like
looking around,
like knowing looks like between people, right? Did you get that?
Yeah.
Where you look across, you kind of go, you make eye contact and go, yeah, I know.
Well, because not only did you see him in the cafeteria, you saw him in the halls, you saw him in the room, you saw him sitting next to a child, and then so over days you start to recognize the people who are there for a while, right? That they haven't come and gone in a day, right? And then you start recognizing the ones that are there long term, and then you're like, oh, okay. And then it's like just like a little nod, like hope, it's almost like you're like, hope today is better for you.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to make this whole thing negative.
I actually wrote a little bit about that in the book, because that whole fiasco for us happened like in the beginning of my deconstruction. And so I'm already tearing some stuff down. And I was in a place at that moment where I'm like, I don't know what I think about these things. And really top of the list was, I don't know what to think about prayer. And at that point, I don't even know how to do it. I don't know. I'm not even sure that it's worthwhile to do it. And so I had some very honest conversations with God that were borderline profane. It sounded more like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, and it did kind of put some of the final nails in the coffin of some of the, prosperity gospel, word of faith guys, the name it and claim it dudes, who were just like, well, if you just have enough faith and you just proclaim okay, tell that to the people suffering in the hospital, losing children.
Yeah.
Tell that to the people who are bearing loved ones. I mean, it's tired, and so I don't recommend deconstructing in the middle of a crisis, but we were already well on the way through the deconstruction when the crises happened. But there was, I don't know, I guess there was some peace found in my, I guess my understanding of suffering now is more along the lines of that co-suffering love of God, like I feel like I fall more on line with like a guy like Thomas Ord or Mark Harris, who like I don't see the intervening hand of God, jumping into human affairs, but I do sense the presence of God through all of that. And so, and I'm sure that's still something that if you ask me today what I'm the most unsure of, it's that whole thing, because there's no way to be sure of it. I can find places of theological, not certainty, but you know what I mean? I can argue a theological point. Because they're all very hypothetical anyway.
Well, and then on top of that, there's I'm not talking about anything on like the televangelist shows or anything like that, but there's some pretty well documented cases where people have miraculously recovered from something,
absolutely.
Right? And is it because of prayer? Is it because God chose to intervene? Or is it because something scientifically worked better for that person because of something in their genetics? And because we don't know, right? But
yeah, I mean,
and I think both sides have a problem with issues that they think they have the answer to, right? And so anyone else who comes up with a different option of how that might have worked is just not true.
Yeah, I listen, I never want to be in a position to poo-poo somebody's faith, right? Or to cast aspersions on their life experiences. I have lots of people who have experienced stuff. They will swear to it to the day they die. Okay, that's great. I'm not here to poke holes in that. And I've seen stuff I thought was miraculous, and maybe it was. My only issue with that, and I'm sure the Mark Harrises of the world and Thomas J. Ords of the world would agree that still leaves a problem, because that puts God into the arbitrary category.
Right. It turns God into a monster, because then God gets to pick and choose who gets healed and who doesn't.
Right.
And so then God is no better than a dictator in a country that chooses to kill off millions of people.
I'll give you a good example. I'm scrolling through Facebook today, and I didn't even catch the person's name because it was so egregious. It was so bad. But it was just a guy on some Christian TV show, and it's a split panel. One guy's interviewing, the other guy's talking, and he's like, when you walk around and you walk around with an angel with you that can tell if you're a tither.
Oh, jeez.
And the guy next to him's like, yeah. And he's like, so you walk into that tire store and that angel's like, man, that's tithe money that's coming in. That's circumcised money, he called it. Apparently we're cutting the tip off our money now. So you come in that tire store with your circumcised money, with your tithe money, and maybe that guy goes in the back to find you a set of tires, and he reaches up for a tire for your car, and he feels, and there's a blemish in that tire. He doesn't know why he noticed it. He doesn't know. He just knows he skips to the next one, and he gives you that one because that other one was going to blow it on the highway and kill you because you bought it with tithe money. I'm like, first of all, that's lunacy. All right,
right.
Just on his, come on, people. Seriously. Second of all, to hell with the person who bought the tire that was messed up because they weren't using that tithe, that circumcised money. See, when you only give 90%, I don't even know I'm not even sure. I have to hear more about his concept of circumcised money. I did feel like I should go into my wallet and just start taking scissors to 10% of each of, hey, why is this bill short?
There you go.
It's been circumcised.
That's a good idea. No, let's start. Yeah. They want 10. You tied 10%, but you only cut 10% of the bill off and sent it in. Your bill's still good. Theirs is shitty.
Every time. Okay. Here's what's going to happen, John, from now on. And I don't know when I'll ever darken the doorstep of a church again, but if I ever do, I'm going to put money in the offering plate, but I'm only putting 10% of it in there.
Right.
It's just going to be the end.
Yeah.
I'm going to circumcise this money right here for you.
If that church is faithful and true, it should somehow turn that money into real money, right? So that's it. I'm cutting 10% off all my bills and I'm sending it to a church. That's how I'm going to tithe from now on.
Make sure you put this in the title of the episode: the year in review, circumcised money, and other weird crap. So I don't know. That struck me as, I watched it twice because I'm like, surely this is a joke. And then,
crazy.
It was like, no, it's not. And stop calling me Shirley. That's good. I put my jokes in airplane mode.
You did. Now, if you got that joke,
then you're old.
You're our kind of people.
And you're old like we are. It was bad. But yeah, so maybe we should do that. We'll do an episode or two one day when we just find something like really, really just like lunatic fringe on the interwebs and go, hey, y'all, check this out.
Sadly, it's not going to be that hard to find.
We'll call it the Hold My Beer episodes.
Hold My Beer. I like it.
Yeah, like you couldn't find nothing crazier than that. Hold My Beer. Check it.
You're onto something.
I think so. So yeah,
we're doing that
down, right? Hold My Beer.
I literally just wrote it down.
So yeah.
Well, that's a good segue into, I think, kind of the final part of this year in review, and that is, what do you see as our challenges and expectations for the upcoming year? Because I got a couple.
Okay.
And I'd like to hear your perspective too.
The challenge as I see it is, well, it's difficult to keep coming up with interesting content, although there's no shortage of interesting people who are doing cool things. I think we benefited in the beginning from just having so much to choose from. It's like, so we just shotgunned invitation after invitation, probably dozens, if not hundreds of invitations out. And so for a little while, we were just sitting in the catbird seat. We had episodes that had been recorded. We had episodes ready to release. We were probably 3 months out on lots of stuff. Now we're to the point. Now part of that has been complicated by me having to go back to work and my time becoming more limited. So, and then obviously we've had a couple little, having the premature baby airlifted to Fort Worth cost us 2 interviews. So that have to be rescheduled. But I think the interesting thing, and maybe if you're listening and you are part of our Facebook group, maybe we should put this as a question to the group out there. But maybe
Maybe be.
Would be. I think it would be interesting in 2023 to diversify a little bit and start doing some other episodes that aren't just interviews of people, maybe that are more content driven about,
And we had talked about that. And matter of fact, our private Facebook group, some people in there asked, it's like, hey, why don't you guys just do an episode every once in a while, just you guys? And I think you and I both, our first response is like, no one wants to hear us.
Well, and I think the numbers bear that out.
But I think it, honestly, as we move into this, where, like you said, we had a plethora, right, of people that we could reach out to. And it's not like we still don't.
No, we still do for sure.
But it has become a little bit, I don't want to say difficult. It's just where we were recording multiple episodes a week to, kind of sandbag and have some stuff, in the works because of work and different things, that just hasn't worked. So to fill in those gaps, I kind of agree that maybe we should do some of those episodes and put them and have them be kind of topic driven. And I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good challenge. For me, one of the biggest challenges, I think, well, it's kind of twofold. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is reaching out to Indigenous people. We haven't done that much. And I think as we step into each one of these ideas, right, and reaching out to people who don't look like us, right, and have different backgrounds than us, and rightly so, I don't take this as a negative. There's a hurdle we have to get over, and that is, why the hell should they trust two old white guys?
Yeah, no,
right?
For sure.
So we saw that, when we were reaching out to women, a little bit of hesitancy about wanting to come on a podcast with two guys who look like us, and questioning, what's our agenda here? I'll always come back to the conversation we had with Christina Cleveland, and unfortunately, we had this off the air, or not before recording, because I had read her book and I was like, wow, it was a really good book. I absolutely loved it. It was a little hard to get through. She's like, it wasn't written for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And 2 years ago, I would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? But now I was like, no, you're right. It wasn't written for me.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that doesn't mean you can't get anything out of it. It just means you weren't the primary audience for that.
Right.
And so, I can't wait to talk to Rachel Luna, because I'm part of the way through her book, Permission to Offend. And because that's kind of that deal, right? Of like, listen, I'm going to say some things that are going to be uncomfortable for you to hear. And we've had that conversation with a handful of people, especially this last year. We have talked about like getting over being uncomfortable, embracing the fact that if you're going to experience any kind of change at all, it's going to necessarily come with some discomfort.
Yeah.
Because it's going to challenge some things about you that either you were unaware of, which is always, it's always a little disconcerting when other people see things in you that you don't see. It's going to challenge your certainties. It's going to challenge all of your assumptions. So I'm to the point now where I would much rather have those conversations. It is striking to me that I'm less uncomfortable. How's this for a weird one? I'm less uncomfortable talking about race, and I'm less uncomfortable talking about, say, feminist topics, and I still get weirded out talking about sex.
Well, I think we had, I don't remember who we talked to this about, but
with Kate Ott, with who was the one that wrote the book on purity culture?
Linda K.
Klein, yeah. So when those topics veer not in the sort of abstract way talking about sex and maybe gender identity and sexual politics and stuff like that, but when they actually get into say sex robots and sexual and she had some amazing points about sexual ethics and even when we talked about purity culture to some extent, I did feel, I'm like, ooh, those are some places where I still, I still feel myself like hedging my words quite a bit more, or because those are places that are, I think, more deeply ingrained in us to be awkward about.
Yeah. And from a very young age, we were told that this is super taboo and you don't talk about this. You talk about this maybe, you don't talk about it until you get married. And then you and your wife talk about it in the privacy of your bedroom or whatever, I guess. But if you don't talk about it prior to that, how the fuck are you guys going to talk about it in the privacy? It's like, okay, so here we are, we're married and we're sitting in this room and we're supposed to have like sex talk, and you're like, I don't even know what we're supposed to talk about. So yeah, it becomes super awkward. And then you want to talk about it in the public, and you're like, no, you don't talk about this in the public. You never bring this up in public. What are you talking about? And then again, I watch the generations after us, right? And they become more comfortable with these hard questions. And it's hard and also so amazingly freeing at the same time to have conversations with, people like my children's age.
Oh, yeah.
Who, they call out bullshit when they see bullshit. So when they see racist, where in the past we might have like, well, that's bad, but we're not going to really call anybody out on it. My kids' generations they're going to call people out. They're like, that's freaking racist, what you just said. Yeah. And so I've taken a lot of ownership of being able to step into that kind of mode when I see bad shit happen. I'm more willing to say, hey, we can't talk like this.
Right.
So, and I'm really encouraged by the younger generations that are coming past us who are, it's not even an issue for them. It's like they just call out bullshit when they see it, and it's amazing. So that's awesome. The other challenge I see that we need is we need to start reaching out to people of different faiths. And again, it's going to be hard, and it's going to have to be intentional because again, why would anybody say?
Yeah, why would you? Why would I come on?
Yeah,
I have an in with a guy that I think we can get on the show. So, a good friend of Brad Jersak's, who is a well-known Muslim peace activist.
That'd be cool. That'd be great.
His name is Safi Kaskas. And I follow him on Facebook. The man loves Jesus. Like it's an amazing thing. So he's this guy trying to bridge the gap between Christians and Muslims in particular, because, Jesus figures prominently inside of Islam,
Right.
And so anyway, he'd be a good guy to talk to, be a good first step into that community. The other person we can reach out to, this sounds more like a planning session now, but Mercy Aiken has offered to put us in touch with Palestinians. We need to take her up on that. So we need to talk to some folks who are living in that world and walking through that minefield metaphorically and literally sometimes.
Exactly.
Talking about those two worlds coming together. So I think that's a good goal for ourselves for the year. See how much more diverse we can get in our guest list, and see we've been very fortunate that through John's efforts in particular, we've gotten some pretty good relationships with publishers. To the point now where we are getting requests and books unsolicited at times for guests. So John will get a book or someone reaching out to him going, hey, we got a book coming out. We'd like you to interview him. So that's gratifying. That to me, that means, number one, it means they think people are listening, but also that they feel safe, that this would be a good place for their authors to go and promote their work, knowing that they'll be respected and their point of view will be shared without without a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, the one that that stands out. I mean, I just got one a couple days ago, so I'm working with a publicist on that one right now. But the one that really sticks out for me as like, okay, this is cool, is we already knew, and I already planned to reach out to him anyway. But Pete Enns has a book coming out, I believe, in February or March, I can't remember. And before I could even reach out to him, his publicist reached out to us and said, hey, do you want to copy this book? And when can he be on the podcast?
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So, people are noticing that we're trying to do something. I don't want to say different because I don't know how different we are. I think we are. But I mean, I was just looking because we were talking about, and it's, I hate patting ourselves on the back. I really don't like it.
Pat it.
But, there's a place where you can kind of see where you rank, right? So we are now in the top 5% of all podcasts worldwide, and then they give you kind of a list here of how many podcasts there are.
There's millions.
Approximately. There's, and this is, we're in the top 5% of over 3 million podcasts, right? So, and obviously there's people, and we can name a bunch of podcasts that are in the top 1% that we know. So there's a goal still, but just to know that and I think one of the reasons why we're doing well is one of the things that we discussed is we just have to be super consistent. We have to be open and honest, and when we don't know something, to admit that we don't know, admit when we make mistakes, and have no agenda, and let the podcast go where it goes organically.
Well, and here's our other tagline, John. You ready? They come for the guests, but they stay for the comedy.
You're not wrong.
No, there is something to be said for chemistry. I've listened. You're good at what you do. And I feel like you and I together are entertaining, if nothing else. I have.
We are the new like Lewis and Martin or Abbott and Costello.
Sure. Name Laurel and Hardy. I'd get to be the fat guy again. Yeah. One too. Thanks.
Hey, I'm the straight man. I'm the one that has to just try to drive your jokes in a way that's like
you just set me up.
Like
you set me up, but I knock them down.
Oh, don't worry. I'm dumb enough to set you up with some really good ones.
I remember listening. I was talking to my buddy Todd, who listens to the podcast, and again, Todd, and he was like, man, I think it was like the first month or so we had the podcast, and he was just sort of getting into some of the people that we were wanting to talk to, and man, he was just falling in love with Brad Jurczak, right? Man, he was after he listened to the interview and he'd read More Christ-Like God, he was just gobbling up everything he could find online, anything and he sent me a link for a podcast where somebody had interviewed Brad, and I was like, that was tough. That was a hard one. I'm like, you have to work pretty hard to make Brad not interesting. So,
really.
So all of that, listen, I'm obviously I'm not throwing shade and I'm not naming names. It was somebody I didn't know or hadn't heard of. And I was like, man, that's just, there are people out there doing this who are having, measures of success. And there are those who are doing it who are struggling. So I feel lucky to be kind of in the middle of the pack there. Like, listen, I would love to have Heretic Happy Hours numbers. We don't. That's fine. We're in the top 5%. They're in the top 1%. And they're, they probably 3 or 4 to 1 as far as downloads on any given week.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But, that being said, they are who they are. And they're, we aren't interested in we're not competing with them in that way. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But we also want people to come onto the show and feel like it's not just going to go out into the ether. People are going to listen. And hopefully that will result in publicity for what work they're doing. They'll see the value in coming on the podcast and maybe reaching a different segment of their audience. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have a book to promote, hey, give us a call. We're always on the lookout for more guests. But yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to next year, man.
Yeah, and I'd like to give a shout out real quick to our private Facebook group. I think it's we have an upper 300s in there. I mean, I think
we're close to 400 now.
Are we?
I think so.
But at the same time, I mean, I know that there's other private Facebook groups that have it. They're in the thousands, right? And I'm not saying it wouldn't be cool to have that, but at the same time, there's still, even though there's over 300, there's still like an intimacy and willingness to talk and bring up subjects. And I really appreciate what they've brought to the table in helping us move forward. They've brought up interesting topics they would like us to talk about. They've given us guest names that we've reached out to and got on there. So if you aren't a part of our private Facebook group, come and join us. You'll have some fun.
Search for us on Facebook. It's just This Is Not Church private group. Send us an invitation. Unless you are a known felon or serial killer, we will allow you in the group. We don't. I mean, it's a cool. I've been a part of a lot of, and I still am to some degree a part of a lot of private Facebook groups, and some of them get contentious and weird. Some of them have to. Yeah. Some of them have to be. You have to have administrators who, man, they have to run roughshod over people that haven't. We don't have that issue. So it's been I was worried when we started it that it would take up too much of our time. We'd have to regulate it, and we don't, man. I think I've had one person in the entire time that group has been open that I've kicked out, and he was a friend of mine. So, hey, you come in here, show your ass, act a fool, be mean to people, you're going to get the boot, man. That was pretty much the only rule, wasn't it? Just, hey, just be nice. Don't be a dick, and you can pretty much say what you want and do what you want. Just be respectful.
Yeah.
And other than that, stick around. So yeah, I'm excited, man. The private group is cool. We also want to give a shout out to our editor, man, because Eric does a bang up job and has made us sound like we know what we're doing when oftentimes we really, really don't. We're also very thankful for Choir, for Matt, and for Keith, and for Ralph, who was the owner of Choir in the beginning, and he's still connected somehow. I know he's still doing artwork and stuff. I think he's still helping the covers.
Yeah, he still is.
So Ralph Follian, I mean, man, in the very beginning when we were literally nothing and nobody, Ralph was on board. with helping us and connecting us with authors. And so Ralph's a good dude, man. So yeah, we have excellent relationships with people who are just genuinely good people, man. So we're glad that you guys stuck with us through 2022. Happy New Year. By the time you listen to it, it will be 2023. Yeah. And we can all be like, damn, we made it.
We made it to another year.
Woo-hoo, we survived.
We went a whole hour and didn't even really talk about politics. I call that a win.
That is a win. But let me just stop end with this. Screw you, Donald Trump. I'm kidding.
Fuck Trump.
No, truck thump.
Truck thump.
If he comes back in 2024, I'm not sure I'm going to stay.
I already have my visa working out. I'm moving to Canada.
Mine's maxed. Oh, different visa. I don't know, man.
You know how hard it is to get a work? Yeah, okay. Now, hold on. I'm not going to go down.
How hard it is to get a work visa in Canada right now.
Yeah. Trust me, I know. It's not easy.
All right, man. Have a good one. Peace.
All right. Until next time.
Year in review. See, now I just stole the cute stuff.
You just did it.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.